Good to see you. And a glorious and happy Wednesday to you. Um, there's a lot of crazy things happening in the world right now. I'm sure you probably have heard of the pagers that became not pagers, thousands of them all at once, and hurt a bunch of people and kind of oofed a bunch more. And who knows who did it? But it's quite an interesting turn of events. I'll have you know that the there are a bunch of ideas about how it was done. There are Here's the thing: there are a lot of ways it could have actually been done. What is this? What's happening here? I don't know. Seems very dark here. Can you guys hear me? I don't know what's going on here. I got the screen fading or something. Seems to be working. Um, so there's a lot that's going on in that real politic world. That's not the point of this video, though. Other than for me to say the usual thing, which is, people living in war zones sometimes kind of get numb to it, which is a shame, but that's part of life. And as a result, sometimes they make kind of coarse jokes. And while it seems really in poor taste, and you might even say it is, and inarguably, it is a coping mechanism for people who live in places that are in long periods of conflict. I mean, if you live in a place that's at war for many months or years, it's entirely normal for humanity to use humor as a coping mechanism. And why that is because humor helps us connect with each other in a way that's not just talking about the brutality directly, but in a way that takes a jab at it by taking a fracture, a little shard of the truth, and wrapping it in some kind of a punchline. And while again that may seem in some ways to be, not the best way to use words, sometimes it's the easiest way people are able to find. I don't know what's happening here with the brightness of the screen, but oh, hello incognito, hello, I've been trying to reach you about your vehicle's extended warranty. Okay, OG, my vehicles don't have any extended warranties because I don't sell vehicles, at least not directly. My agency helps companies that sell vehicles, and for many years we had a little network there of sites that sell electric vehicle things. And it was really just a network for EVs. Still kind of exists, but in a different incarnation. He didn't make it. There are the old dudes you punch and they don't move. Okay, you look like my sibling used to look when he was off to war. Well, yeah, okay. Spend enough time in war zones and maybe we have similar traits after a while. I don't know. Hopefully not. But anyway, um, so what was I saying? By the way, is the screen fading in and out for you guys? I don't know why. And the screen is doing weird stuff. How you say calm? How you stay calm in situations? How do you stay calm in conflict situations? You stay calm in conflict situations by just carrying on and continuing to live. You don't just panic for no reason. What's the point? How's that going to help you? Hey, bro, where are you from? Bro, I always tell people I am from Spaceship Earth, third planet from the sun. Um, I've lived in many places, and I'm not trying to be coy or anything like that. I've, born in the USA, I'll tell you that much. but I've lived in many places, and hey, folks, wow, time flies. Hey, bro, use survival. I don't know what that means. Anybody else pull over to put lipstick on roadkill, or just me? No, I've never put lipstick on a roadkill. I am from India. All right, India. Hello, India. Love India. Regards to India. What an awesome country in so many ways. So really, this video is about Michael Saylor. I don't know if you guys saw it, but there was a video, came out I think yesterday, discussing, it was an interview with Michael Saylor, in which he actually spoke at length about a great number of things, which, you know, is actually quite insightful for anybody who isn't familiar with him, isn't familiar with his view on Bitcoin, isn't familiar with his journey, his 4-year journey of Bitcoin, because he only really got into it about 4 years ago. Like, he was aware of it before, but he really only got into it about 4 years ago, and started to invest in it, you know, all in 4 years ago. And once he did that, obviously made his company, you know, fantastically successful in terms of returns on investment and how much they're, you know, beating the markets and beating other assets on the markets. You know, they're doing really well thanks to the fact that they've switched their treasury over to Bitcoin. And now we're seeing more and more companies doing the same thing, following suit, putting their treasuries on Bitcoin, and enjoying the fact that they've done that, because they're also getting great returns overall from doing that, right? What's this? What's this say here? Hard to read, because of the screen darkness, fading thing. Anyway, but what I wanted to point out about Mr. Saylor is look, he's a massive whale, right? His interests are not aligned with the interests of the little retail investor, right? So as fascinating as his 4-year journey is, and it is fascinating, and I highly recommend anybody who's not familiar with it to learn about it, even if you're not into Bitcoin, just from a business point of view, right? How the guy took a company that was a, you know, fairly successful software company, although he would tell you it was a small software company, and by measure of other software companies, it's, you know, yeah, like $500 million in cash. That's not considered a huge software company these days, but you know, it was successful enough to have $500 million in cash. Most companies can't say that. So what was his what was the point of that interview? Well, it was to get some insight into Michael Saylor's view and perspective as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, as a software engineer, as a guy, you know, who studied at MIT and learned a whole bunch of different things, and understood, you know, learned the energy thing, and understood just enough about, you know, how the world works to see how Bitcoin can make a difference. Once he saw the light and got kind of orange pilled, right? At the same time, what's this say? Oh, gee, I've been doing that since 2005. Started after rehab. What'd you say? You started what after rehab? You've been doing software since then? Good for you. That's awesome. So, but the thing is, right, what ultimately, he's a relative newcomer to the space. And I'm not dissing him for it. I'm just saying, keep in mind, he's only been at it for 4 years, at the whole Bitcoin thing. He's still very much a newbie, right? And I don't mean to disrespect him at all. To the contrary, he's been an incredibly effective advocate of a thing that he has only just recently gotten into, which is not something most people can say. Right? Most people who are into something for 4 years, within the first year, even within the first month, because he made a significant buy-in, right? When he first started, he didn't just buy, you know, $500 Bitcoin or something. He bought more money than most people will ever have in their life. right? And he just put it all in. And personally, he also bought a bunch, right? And his company, MicroStrategy, owns more than 1% of Bitcoin, but turns out he owns just about that much too. So while MicroStrategy is seeing insane returns, he's also personally seeing insane returns without investors owning his Bitcoin, right? Because investors who are funding the MicroStrategy purchases, it's the investors who own essentially that Bitcoin, right? Or they own the rights to the profits of that Bitcoin that MicroStrategy is buying. But his Bitcoin is his Bitcoin. No investors other than him, as far as we know. So he has a significant amount, like well more than 100,000, as far as I know, maybe almost as much as his company actually owns, and just for himself. And then there's the fact that as a cheerleader for Bitcoin, which is great. I'm all for having a really strong advocate for Bitcoin. I have no problem with that. But you got to remember what his position is. He's a huge whale, and he wants to take all of your crypto. And I'm not so fond of that. Sorry. What do I mean by that? I mean, he really wants to buy not just as much as he can buy. He wants to buy all of it, right? Which, in a way, doesn't really serve a purpose. And he knows that. He knows he can never actually have all of it, or it would kind of have no value. Because if you own all of something that no one else can own, and you refuse to sell any of it to anyone, then it has no value, right, in the market. Yeah, you might have a Gauguin or a Van Gogh or a Calder or a Picasso or, some amazing piece of art that's a one of a kind, and you own it and no one else can own it. That has a kind of a collector value as an artistic collection piece. But when you're talking about a piece of currency, right, a type of money, that doesn't really have a value, right? If you own a thing that's supposed to be a liquid asset that people are constantly trading, and you own 100% of it, or you and 5 friends who are all billionaires also own 100% of it, then it really has no value. Why? Well, because nobody else can make use of it. So what good is that, right? How does it help you to own the entirety of a cryptocurrency, or even 90% of it, and your 10,000 other friends, your 15? Like, think about it. If 15,000 people will ever be, right now 13,500 own more than 90%. Big chunks of fresh coconut I find to be much more delicious and appetizing than when it's ground up. More delicious and appetizing than when it's ground up into little fibers. And for a long, long time, I found myself not enjoying it. Now I don't mind so much. But I mean, like these days. But when I was much, much younger, a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But yeah, I always preferred the big, chunky, fresh, big chunks of fresh coconut. That was always my kick when it came to that. Much more a fan of the fresh than the not fresh. Give me 1 second here while you enjoy a little bit of white scenery there. I'm just doing something that requires both hands here. So, yeah. 1 second. So my point about Michael Saylor. Out here. Yeah, no. My point about Michael Saylor and all these whales who keep talking high on the horse about how great Bitcoin is, and yet they keep purchasing more of it, right? Like he just announced, I think $900 million in purchases of Bitcoin coming up. Like he set up another round for purchases by the company. You know, that should not make the average retail investor happy. Should actually make you quite displeased. And if you're wondering, why would we just be displeased that a billionaire is putting another $1 billion into Bitcoin? Well, because he's taking that $1 billion away from investors who are not billionaires, who might want to get into Bitcoin, who are being fudded out by all the fuddy-duddies. And since they know it's the future of wealth, they don't want the average person to get a hold of any of that wealth. Who is they? You sound like a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm a theorist. They are the people that have all the money right now and always have. They are the super wealthy class. You need to understand that it is a real thing, that there are people in the world who are super wealthy and own most of just about everything that exists. Okay? So it is not some crazy conspiracy theory that the very wealthiest people on earth have most of the assets. That's just a mathematical fact, right? And they want to continue holding most of the assets into the future. But of course, the irony is, like I said, if they own too much of a thing, like Bitcoin, ultimately it will have no value to the general market. If nobody can own any except the wealthiest people, great. You have a collector's item that nobody cares about. You own a Van Gogh. You own a Calder you own a Monet or a Matisse that's worth millions of dollars that no real person can own. Congratulations, you've done well for yourself, but you haven't created a decentralized cryptocurrency that can help people gain financial freedom. What you've done is you've removed that option and made it harder for people to do that, which means that the alternatives for people, regular people, will quickly be discovered as existing in altcoins first, until the whales go and buy all of those, which they will. But until they do, there is still plenty of runway time for average people, retail people who fall within the bell curve of normal distribution, people who aren't already, millionaires or multimillionaires and billionaires. Because just being a millionaire these days doesn't make you wealthy in any way, or even rich in a lot of places, right? You just have like 2 million in the bank. Yes, it's a lot more money than not having 2 million, than having less than 100 grand or 10 grand or 50, 5 grand in the bank, or a few $100 in the bank, which is the case for a lot of people. People will turn to coins like Litecoin and Solana because they see that those are valid alternatives, far more than Bitcoin in many ways, in terms of its affordability, right? You can still afford to buy a whole Litecoin for like $60, right? The last I looked, Litecoin, $63.73. Solana, $130. Shiba USD is 0.00001327 dollars. You can own literally tens of thousands of them for $1. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be the greatest project of all time, but if it ever does take off and approaches anywhere even near like 0.0001 penny, you'll already have 10x'd it. And if it ever approaches 0.001 penny, or dollar, sorry, you'll have 100x'd it. It's entirely possible that it could 100x. Why? Because an asset with that kind of liquidity, with that kind of market cap, with that kind of circulating supply, with that kind of, all this stuff, is extremely volatile and can do some crazy things. Now, I'm not saying Shiba or SHIB will do that. Not at all. It might stay down there forever and might just die off, right? But it's not impossible. I mean, look, Hex, coin made by Richard Hart some years ago, started out basically free, went up all the way to 50 cents, and is currently trading at $0.002. So extremely volatile. If you know how to trade, you could have made a fortune on that coin. Link, currently at $10.58. Link was all the rage just a few years ago, if you don't remember. All the rage. A Litecoin has, again, all of the qualities. All of them. It's the same code. Literally the only difference is the number of miners and nodes. That's it, right? The number of miners and nodes and arguably wallets. But guess what? Most people who have a crypto wallet, they typically have Litecoin available as a coin in that wallet. There are obviously some coins that are single coin only, like some wallets are single coin only that, like, for example, only Bitcoin in cold car wallets or whatever. Coldlar, whatever it's called. Yeah, I forget. There's a few coins, wallets that only accept a specific coin, right? But Litecoin is pretty much accepted in every wallet that is a multi-coin crypto wallet. It's pretty much sold on every exchange where you find Bitcoin. It's the alternative to Bitcoin. It's often called the silver to Bitcoin's gold. Now, if it's really the silver to Bitcoin's gold, and there's only 4 times as many Litecoin as there are Bitcoin in terms of max cap, right? There's 21 million max cap Bitcoin. There's 84 million max cap Litecoin. The transaction speeds on Litecoin are 4 times faster than they are on Bitcoin. That's why there's 4 times as many coins being mined. And it has all of the exact same other qualities: immutable, uncensorable, transportable. You could bring it across the border with you no problem. It's divisible, mobile, lightweight, peer-to-peer. No need for a third party, middleman nonsense. You can have it, but you don't need to. You can custody your own Litecoin on your own wallets. You can remember the seed phrases in your head. It's the exact same technology as Bitcoin. And anything that goes on Bitcoin happened on Litecoin first. That's the whole purpose of Litecoin, right? Was to create effectively a test net, if you want to call it that. It's a very valuable test net. Why? Because it doesn't fail. It demonstrates the value and the validity of the Bitcoin protocol before Bitcoin does. That is valuable. There's only 4 times as many, and it's about 1% of the price of a Bitcoin. It should be about a quarter of the price of a Bitcoin. Do you understand? When I say should be, I mean just mathematically, if all things were equal, which they're not, but if they were, if I have a thing that has 4 times as many as this other thing, but they have all the same values and technologies and qualities, and people really want this other thing because it's so rare, but all things being equal, they are identical in properties, then this thing should only be worth about 4 times as much as this thing. Only because of the limited supply. And when you realize that this thing is actually 91% owned by the whales, and only this little sliver here is owned by retail or is unmined, And this thing, more than, let's say, a quarter of it is owned by whales, but all the rest of it is still retail. Which one do you think is actually more valuable and useful? Oh, but I can divide these things by 100 million per token, per coin. That's no problem. Yeah, you can. You can, in fact, you can divide them by even more. If they want to, they can make that 100 million, they can make it a billion, milli Satoshis per Bitcoin. No problem. They can keep cutting that number down. Keep increasing the supply of pieces of Satoshis so that it can essentially run forever. Okay. But again, if the vast, overwhelming supply is owned by a speck of the population, and the other coin that has all the same properties is owned by retail investors that actually use it and aren't just hoarding it, So anyway, that's my point about this whole Michael Saylor thing is just because a guy who has a vast quantity of something that maybe even you want, or maybe even you have a significant quantity, or maybe you are working towards getting a significant quantity, or maybe you hate it, doesn't matter. But just because a guy who has a significant quantity of a rare thing has also a loudmouth platform, and I mean that in a complimentary way, not in an insulting way in any way. Like, he's a very vocal advocate, and good for him. Like, I really do appreciate that. But just because he's doing that doesn't mean he's looking out for your best interest as a Bitcoiner or as somebody looking into crypto. He's not looking out for your best interest. He's looking out for number one, as they say. He's looking out for himself first. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly fine and normal for people to look out for their interest first. That is normal. As the old expression goes, God helps those that helps themselves. Right? When you go on an airplane flight, you go through the safety instructions. There's that part with the air mask, the oxygen mask. What do they tell you if you're a parent? If you're a parent and those masks fall, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to put the mask on yourself first before you put it on your kid. And the reason for that is it's really hard to help others if you can't breathe. Right? That's why you're supposed to help yourself before you help others. So there's nothing wrong with Michael Saylor helping himself before he helps others. How is he helping himself? He's talking about how great Bitcoin is while he keeps accumulating more Bitcoin. So he's generating significant interest in a thing he owns a significant quantity of. More than 1% of all of it that can ever exist. I'm trying to get that through to you because if you haven't figured it out by now, as I said earlier in the video, they want your Bitcoin. They want all your Bitcoin, and they want all your crypto, and they don't care what kind it is. If you think they're going to stop at Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana, you're wrong. They will keep coming until they get more of everything that you could possibly want to own. That's the way the world has always been. That is the way humanity will always be. Right? We don't live in a world where people are like, hey, let's be utopian and give equal distribution to everyone. We don't live in that world. It would be nice in many ways if we lived in a world where them that has would not have an egregious amount more than the people at the bottom of the barrel. So that or at the very least, so that the people at the very bottom of the barrel wouldn't have to worry about whether or not they can survive to pay their basics. Okay? Rent, food, bills, medicine, education, clothes, the basic things people need to live. And we do live in a world where there are enough resources to assure that for all 8 billion people. There's not even a question about that. There is enough wealth on this planet right now that we could literally feed every man, woman, and child forever. Right? We could put aside a fund. The UN could, for example, I mean, I wouldn't trust them with it at all, but the International Monetary Fund, in theory, they're supposed to be doing things like this anyway. They don't do it, right? The World Bank is supposed to be helping countries not go into debt or get out of debt. No, that's not their job. Their job is to make sure the countries that are in debt stay in debt and have their debt managed according to loan structures and everything else from loaning countries and all that stuff, right? So they're not there to help countries get out of debt, unfortunately. They're pretty much do the opposite, keep countries debt slaves of the US dollar and the whole global financial system. But in theory, the IMF or the World Bank or all these, or some NGO that doesn't even exist yet, or some organization could amass a pool of money to make sure that nobody is want for basics. That wealth exists. That is not even a question. Right? It doesn't mean you have to give everyone millions of dollars. No. But to guarantee that people have food, shelter, medicine, clothes, and enough money for, they get public education at the very least, that exists. That exists. We're talking about quadrillions of dollars in assets around the world. There are quadrillions of dollars, and there are millions of companies who have many billions of dollars in profits, meaning they've stored up billions. They could easily, just on annual profits alone, not even dipping into the past, on existing annual profits, without having to spend all of their annual profits, but just taking a small little portion of their annual profits, if they would collectively take out 1% or whatever and put it in that fund, it could ensure that literally the 2 to 3 billion people on Earth that live below the poverty line, wherever they live, because not everybody lives in sub-Saharan Africa, where the poverty line is like $1 a day, right? Some people live in America and they're piss poor, as they say. They don't have money to eat. They have more than $1 a day, but that's, if you have a family of 4, $50 a day is poverty. All right. In fact, it's probably more than that. I'd be surprised if it wasn't $100 a day at this point. But even so, the point is, even for all the people in America and all the people in Europe who have the least poor people who are still poor and they're just as hungry as the people in Asia or Africa or South America who are hungry, right? You could cover all of them and all the ones in those other continents. Asia, Africa, South America, North America, Europe, Australia, cover it all. And all the islands, big and small. There's enough money to go around to cover them. But what is the interest? What do the super wealthy people want? Do they want to make life easier for the working classes or for the poor? No, they don't. Michael Saylor makes these great memes and he says, oh, buy Bitcoin or enjoy staying poor or whatever. That's very funny, but it's also not. He makes very conceited arguments like you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve it. Really? I find that to be disgustingly conceited. I mean, it's funny, memeable, ha, but it's basically let them eat cake. It's a 21st century version of Marie Antoinette is what that is. If you don't know who Marie Antoinette is and her famous expression, let them eat cake, let's just put it this way. It cost her her head eventually when the hungry poor people got sick and tired of the kings and queens and off with their head kind of thing. Had a revolution. Didn't go so well for the royals who were sticking their finger in the eyes of the hungry. And telling people that they only get Bitcoin at the price they deserve is patently offensive. If it doesn't offend you, in 2024, to hear a multi-billionaire, a guy who never needs Bitcoin ever, he could buy any asset he needs if the dollar ever dies, which it probably won't in his lifetime. It's dying, yes, but it will probably last 30, 40 years. Maybe not, but even if not, he's set to buy whatever he needs in whatever the next asset class will be. And he certainly has far more Bitcoin than he will ever need. To not be offended by a guy like that saying you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve, I shudder to think what the peasant classes will do when the revolution actually happens. I hope there won't be a revolution like that ever again. But it was important that it happened because it gave the people of France freedom and democracy. And that helped the Americans with their revolution for freedom and democracy and implementing, the colonies, the Constitution throughout the colonies and building the greater United States and eventually being able to purchase the greater territory known as the Louisiana Purchase from the French. But think about that. I would not want to be Michael Saylor saying you only get Bitcoin at the price you deserve when basically 8 billion people on the planet don't have any. And it's quickly becoming the future of finance and the future of wealth. So what are you saying, that basically nobody deserves Bitcoin? 13,500 people. You can't even fill a medium-sized hockey arena, like NHL hockey arena, with 13,500 people. That's how many people own 91% of all the Bitcoin that there can ever be. Not even enough to sell out like an NHL hockey arena. Think about that. That isn't a significant amount of the population of the earth. That's negligible. Let me just run a quick, because, let me just look at the number. Roughly 8 billion. Let's just say 8 billion. No, it's probably more. 8 billion. And 13.5 thousand, right? 13.5 thousand people. .00000016875. That's the percentage of people that own 91% of the Bitcoin. The other 9% of the Bitcoin, 6% of which, or 5.5% of which isn't mined yet, 3% of which is owned by retail. 3%. So if you extrapolate it, that means for 8 billion people, There's nothing. It's not a decentralized asset. Oh, the miners are decentralized and the coders are decentralized. Woo! Do you know that there are actually decentralized coding programs that have existed long before Bitcoin? And they actually have more decentralized coders than Bitcoin? Did you know that? Have you heard about a thing called Linux? It's an operating system. It's the operating system that runs most of the internet. It's open source. It was invented as a derivative of Unix. It was invented by a guy named Linus Torvalds. Linus, named Linux after Linus. And it also sounds a bit like Unix, but funny. He made it open source and decentralized it in doing so. And it became the most popular operating system that runs the vast majority of web servers and internet servers around the world, far more than Microsoft. In fact, it became so popular that operating systems that are close to it, that are also derivatives of Unix, things like BSD and then FreeBSD, which is an open source version of BSD, became integrated into things like Apple's operating system, which is basically Linux, but with BSD flavors and stuff. And then Microsoft did it too. So Linus made Linux actually become the most popular operating system in the world in many ways, because it's basically integrated into all of the major operating systems in some way. Now you can say, well, Microsoft is still proprietary, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's true. But if you look at their code of the operating system, you'll notice since some time ago, there's a bunch of Linux in there. If you look at Apple's code since a good bunch of years, there's a bunch of Linux in there. It is by far way more decentralized in its developer net, in its user net, than Bitcoin ever has been. There are millions and millions of software developers in the world writing code, writing applications for Microsoft and for Apple and for Linux. There are not millions and millions of people writing applications for Bitcoin. We might get there someday in the future, but at the moment, that is not the reason people get Bitcoin. And it is not decentralized like Linux is. Am I suggesting Linux should have a cryptocurrency? No, I'm not suggesting that. But I'm also not against it. It has a better decentralized distribution. It has a very strong core developer group. It's already adopted by the largest software companies on the planet that make the most popular software and the most popular consumer electronics devices. You might think it's boring to buy the new iPhone, and it, I can't disagree with you. It's just an iPhone. Or it's boring to buy another Mac or Windows compatible computer. But those millions and hundreds of millions, if not billions of devices that are sold every year, they all run on similar code. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Have you ever heard Bill Gates say, people get Microsoft when they deserve it, at the price they deserve it? Did you ever hear Steve Jobs say anything that absurd? People can get Apple at the price they can deserve it. Apple is a premium brand. They make their name on being premium in their design, being expensive. We value add, user experience, They are the buzzword company. And they built a hugely successful brand, whether you love them or hate them or both, by not being cheap. But if they ever told people, well, you can only get this when you at the price you can afford it, or at the price you deserve it. What? What? How rude. Like, how patently rude. So, again, I didn't make this video to rip on Michael Saylor, but I do want to point out that he's just a guy who doesn't care about your interests. He wants to own as much Bitcoin as possible and as much other stuff as possible, even if he doesn't admit it. Because he sees the power in that, just like everyone else does. So don't get suckered in to whatever some guy with a loud platform is saying when the only interests he's pumping are his own. Okay? I'm not telling you to buy Bitcoin. I'm not telling you to buy Litecoin. I'm not telling you to buy fiat dollars or euros or yen or gold or oil or Tesla stock or Apple stock or rice or corn. I'm not telling you to buy anything. Do I think that Bitcoin is going to have significant potential to make a huge impact on the world economy and energy, etc.? And more importantly, value transfers? Yes, 100%. I absolutely do. I think it already is making an impact. That's why it's constantly being talked about and more. But do I think you only get Bitcoin at the price you deserve? It's so offensive. It's hard to even repeat it without kind of getting that sick feeling. It's really offensive. I think people who say that kind of thing should really be careful. And I mean really be careful, because there are some whack job people out there, and there are also just some very angry and hungry people out there who aren't even crazy, who are just so offended by things like that. And some of them might have even studied history, and they know what happened to Marie Antoinette. It doesn't go well. It doesn't go well when you offend people who have nothing by dangling something shiny in front of them and saying, ha ha, you don't have any. Ask Eddie Murphy. He'll tell you all about that. Go watch Delirious. Go watch Eddie Murphy Raw. You'll learn a thing. It's comedy acts he did back in the 80s. Very funny. Also very telling about the difference between the haves and the have-nots. Offending the have-nots with statements like that has historically proven to be a very, very significant mistake by the haves. When you're riding around in your powdered face and your powdered wigs in your horse-drawn carriage, or the equivalent of it in today's society, and you're laughing at the poor people. Oh, look at the poor people outside of your carriage with your golden wheels, and you live in a fancy palace or mansion behind, gold-lined fences. And you think it's so funny how the poor are so stupid because they don't buy this incredibly expensive asset that you own a huge chunk of. And you think they only get it at the price they deserve it when they can barely afford to eat? There's something very wrong with a person who thinks that. There's something very, very wrong with a person who thinks like that, and who, more importantly, speaks like that in public. It is deeply offensive. And honestly, if I were to speak with Michael Saylor, I would tell him, bro, maybe retract that statement. Maybe make a more grandiose statement. Maybe show the world that you actually care about the have-nots. At least, for if nothing else, to make sure that when the day comes that the big fiat fall that you say is on the way happens, you're not the first one they come after. Because that's exactly who they're going to go after. The people who have everything. Look at every revolution in history. Like literally every one. Name me a revolution, an actual popular uprising where people didn't go straight for the head of state and straight for the treasury and straight for the wealthiest commerce people and merchants and wealth hoarders of other types. That's why there are revolutions, to redistribute the wealth by any means necessary. And it usually does not go well for the people who have been stingy with, and just greedier and greedier, diseased with avarice to such a high extent that they have no compassion for everybody. They never gave any charity. They never helped anybody who didn't have any means. They're usually the first targets. Anyway, that would be my advice. If you are fortunate to be a have, be generous in your charity, especially while the world around you burns and while the great financial reset or the death of fiat, which is inevitable, happens slowly until it's not. The dollar is dying slowly until it isn't. It will one day happen very quickly. Until then, it's a slow death, and it is eroding in purchasing power every moment of every day. Every moment of every day. So, keep that in mind and don't get suckered. Don't get suckered into becoming like that. The haves that don't care about the have-nots. Don't be heartless just because you've amassed a bunch of material assets. Don't think it's okay to meme, oh, the poor don't have anything. Oh, ha, ha, ha. They shall only get what they deserve when they are hardworking enough for us. Ha, ha, ha. That is very dangerous for your own well-being. That is not a safe way. Never mind the fact that it's just unethical as hell. That is an extremely risky way to try to live your life. History demonstrates it. Learn your history if you don't know about that. Go read about the French Revolution or the American Revolution or just about any revolution ever. Literally. It is always about a redistribution of power, and that includes a redistribution of wealth, blood, and treasure. If you don't know that, you've never learned a thing about the world you live in and the history of the people that you are a part of. In which case, you really should. Just
Go read a basic history book. Go read like a 4th grade history book. You'll learn more from that than you will sitting there and looking at stupid memes. And don't get me wrong, I love memes. They're funny. But, you know, I make a ton of memes, but that doesn't mean I base my worldview on them. My worldview may impact the memes that I make or that I find funny. But memes aren't a worldview. They're just funny expressions, funny commentary on things happening or happened or about to happen. That's all they are. Internet memes I'm talking about. Anyway, that's going to do it for now, folks. And as always, thank you for watching. If you hate this video, click the thumbs up button 3 times. That tells Google how much you hate it. If you like this video, you know, click it once or click it 5 times. The alternative, if you don't want to click the thumbs up video, click the negative button twice or 4 times. In any case, I hope you got something from this video. Whether you leave a comment or not, it'd be nice if you did because I'm curious about the feedback. Whether you tell somebody about it, share it, whatever. Most importantly, you know, I hope you got something out of this. It's not my usual talking about the price or the volatility, entropy, probability, and statistics. It's sometimes there are other things to talk about, as there are right now. So if you want to watch the Alpha Trading live streams, be sure to do that. You just go to alphatradinghq.com/Discord. It's free to enter the Discord. It's free to get your volatility starter kit of indicators and a free chart. Here, I'll show you even. Can I do this? Let me show you. You get this chart. Or I'll turn it sideways. Will that help? You got this chart, basically. You got these indicators, the volatility indicators, correlation, and the ALR and the AVQ. You know, then you can compare that with the price. You know, not for comparing, but it's for using to read the indicators. It's totally free. I highly recommend it. It's how you can learn to trade volatility, probability, and statistics. Something real weird happening with the light. I don't know if you guys can see well with the light, but anyway, that's going to do it for now. Our live streams on Alpha Trading are Monday through Friday, and they start at 9 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Hope to see you there. And until the next video, cheers.